When the episode had passed, Hunt told Rabel what had triggered him. It was a flashing lime green light. It had brought him back to September of 1984. A press conference had been called to inform the public Hunt had been arrested and would be charged for Sykes' murder. He stood behind a floor-to-ceiling chain-link fence that separated him from the media. As he tried to hold back tears, Hunt focused on the socks of a newspaper reporter to endure the ordeal. Hunt told Rabel the color of the light was the exact same color as the reporter's socks. Rabel said Hunt showed other signs of trauma. He would disappear for days at a time and often had difficulty traveling. On most instances, he required a companion. Rabel said the changing of the world also had an effect on Hunt's trauma.
He was a kid. He was 19 when he got in prison, so he didn't know about air travel, cell phones, computers, and all that, and so it was a mysterious world. But it was really more than that. You know, it was trauma affects your brain and makes you feel stuck in the past.
Zurich said in her research for her book, Beyond Innocence, The Life Sentence of Darryl Hunt, others imprisoned in their youth, similarly to Hunt, experienced this sense of being frozen in time.
Other people who have been in prison, who went to prison as Darryl Hunt did in their youth, have talked to me about this. You go to prison when you're 19, the rest of the world grows up and has relationships and has families and has jobs, and you're still partly stuck in the place that you were as a 19, 20-year-old man.
Zurich cited in her book a study by Sandra Westervelt and Kim Cook, where they observed men and women who had been wrongfully imprisoned experienced a deeper level of PTSD. They named it continuing traumatic stress disorder. They said these men and women showed signs of paranoia, profound depression, and insomnia. Jamie Lau, Deputy Director for the Duke's Law Center for Criminal Justice Professional Responsibility, said he noticed these signs in his own clients.
This continuing traumatic stress that individuals who are wrongly incarcerated feel, heightened level of anxiety all the time, paranoia, distrust, difficulty trusting others. But you have to imagine, not only were they incarcerated, but they were incarcerated because of this broken system that, despite their innocence, resulted in them losing, significant periods of their life.
He said he also observed hypervigilance in his clients.
A client that I had for the first few years of release after being exonerated, whenever a law enforcement officer would be around, whenever you see the presence of law enforcement, whether it be a law enforcement officer on a highway or in a store, would call me and put his phone on speaker. Even if he didn't come into contact with the law enforcement officer at all.
His client's behavior arose from fear that an encounter with an officer would lead to a negative situation.
If you're wrongfully incarcerated, you don't have that faith that law enforcement or society will only provide a negative consequence to you if you do something wrong. You exist in a fear that at all times, no matter what conduct you're engaged in, you could be subject to arrest, prosecution, and conviction, whether you've done anything right or wrong.
Those who have been wrongfully imprisoned also deal with the long-term physical effects of a life behind bars.
Rarely does any person who is incarcerated come out of that incarceration healthier than when they went in.
Some of the health issues he observed in his clients were diabetes, shoulder problems, back problems, and hypertension.
The physical toll, I think, is a direct result of the emotional toll, not taking care of yourself as well as you otherwise would potentially if you weren't an incarcerated person.
Access to health care for those incarcerated is limited.
And there's some inadequacy with regards to health care. I mean, just accessing it. You have to put in a request. You have to pay from your commissary account for the medical visit as a means to try and discourage people from seeking medical care they need.
Rabel also noticed health issues in a client he helped get out of prison.
We got him out after he'd been in for 42 years. And he was out less than a year before he died of a heart attack. But, it was just the wear and tear on his body of 42 years of wrongful incarceration.
Hunt's own advocacy work might have added to the trauma from his time wrongfully imprisoned.
He took a lot on himself. I thought when he got out, he might help me on the Innocence Project type work, helping individuals get out. But he wanted to help everybody.
Zurich said the constant retelling of his hardships possibly increased his woes.
I think there was tension there, so I think it did give him tremendous purpose and meaning, but especially all the public speaking he did that required him to retell over and over again the story of his wrongful conviction. I think rather than being cathartic, I think finally it became, it was damaging for him.
The documentary that told of his triumphs in the justice system and inspired others began to affect his mood.
His wife told me that they would go to these events and that he couldn't stand to watch the documentary anymore, that it was too upsetting, and that finally his life became the retelling of this horrible thing that had happened to him. But I think that prevented him from moving on.
His speaking engagements and advocacy work elevated Hunt to a celebrity. Oftentimes, he was noticed wherever he went. Before Hunt was wrongfully convicted, he talked about living a decent life. He wanted to work for the city of Winston-Salem like his grandfather who raised him. He wanted to have a family, a house with a back porch and a dog.
He wanted a family, he wanted a little house, he wanted just a basic job. He wanted to have a backyard, and instead there he was leading this very public, pretty high pressure kind of life. And I think the whole thing was just finally too much.
To cope with the stress, Hunt began using opioids. When the physical effects of the drug use became too much, he told close friends he had been battling prostate cancer. Hunt had moved to Georgia for a year when he told others he was battling cancer. In early 2016, he moved back to North Carolina and said he was receiving treatments for the cancer. He and Rabel were planning to attend the National Innocence Conference in Texas in April. In March of that year, Hunt went missing. Friends and loved ones searched for him. Hunt was found dead in the College Plaza shopping center. He had a gunshot wound to his stomach, and police ruled his death as a suicide.
I got a call in the middle of the night on March 13th, early Sunday morning, that they had found his body. And then to find out that they thought that he had shot himself was like a complete shock.
More revelations about Hunt came out after his death.
He told us that he had been diagnosed with prostate cancer. And so it was like, and that he was losing all this weight. Well, he didn't have prostate cancer. After he died, the autopsy showed that he didn't, and they got medical records from where he said he went, and he didn't have it. He was lying about stuff so that he could get more drugs.
Hunt's struggle had ended. Hunt's struggles with being wrongfully imprisoned opened a door into how society can better help those with the same plight. According to the National Registry of Exonerations, 3,400 people have been exonerated since 1989. Not all exonerees are equal. Hunt was able to receive compensation for his time spent in prison. In North Carolina, those exonerated receive compensation, but not all states offer compensation. While money may help, it doesn't give back years lost to prison. Rabel said his years as Hunt's lawyer helps him in his daily work. Rabel works as the director of the Innocence and Justice Clinic at Wake Forest University. Hunt's struggles remain top of mind for Rabel as he tries to help others who have been wrongfully imprisoned.
I want to get people out of prison, and they want to get out of prison. But I'm always in the back of my mind thinking, okay, if we get them out, where are they going to go?
Rabel says he wants to make sure those exonerated have a family support system for the journey ahead.
We try to work with people and make sure that we have the attention, the counseling, and the financial help that they need, but it's still a struggle.
The struggle Rabel is referring to is the difficulties that not only those exonerated, but also those who are released from prison face re-entering into society. Zurich said discarding these re-entry barriers could be beneficial.
I think we need to remove the structural barriers, and by that I mean rules, laws, licensing regulations, all kinds of very real barriers that make it so difficult for anybody coming home from prison to really restart their lives. Some scholars have taken to calling this a civil death, that once you even after you have served your time, you're almost in a kind of purgatory, that all the civil rights available to people, to all the rest of us, don't exist for somebody with a criminal record, especially a felony record.
Lau agreed that we need to work on creating ways to better assist those coming back home after prison.
There are some fundamental things that a person needs to successfully navigate, in society. Among those things is, stable housing, first and foremost. So we should do a better job helping all people returning to society into a stabilized circumstance where they can then go forward and, hopefully be a contributor to society.
One North Carolina initiative is a starting point. North Carolina will now give state ID cards to some people who are released after being in prison.
It's actually one of the most immediate, profound impacts on people who are incarcerated, not having an identification card that they can even use to help them establish themselves coming back into society.
Rabel said a look at our justice system might also offer some insight for the future.
And I think we need to have a discussion in this country about this whole idea of incarceration. We have this belief that people can just be thrown away. And I'm talking about people that, there's probably 100,000 people who are innocent that are still in prison, but there's hundreds of thousands more who are there but shouldn't be because of the over-criminalization in society.
To approach the subject, the Wake Forest Law School, along with other organizations, is hosting a symposium in February called Rethinking Incarceration. While Hunt's life involved several tragedies, his wrongful conviction and eventual exoneration brought changes to the justice system. The Racial Justice Act was passed. Although it has since been repealed, it halted death row executions in North Carolina while appeals are in process. The creation of the North Carolina Innocence Inquiry Commission, which is the only state agency in the country that can review wrongful conviction cases with the power to subpoena. 15 to 16 people have been exonerated since its founding, as well as the passage of the Eyewitness Identification Reform Act, which created better practices and how police conduct investigation with witnesses. Hunt touched many lives by sharing his story, but ultimately his time in prison weighed heavily on his psyche.
Darryl's exoneration got him out of prison, but the charges ended up giving him the death penalty anyway. He was stuck in time. He was always incarcerated. He never was really freed.
Reporting from Winston-Salem, Carrington Harris, WFMY News 2.